When my grandmother retired from farming 30 years ago, she rented out the land on our farm and it's been farmed by a tenant ever since. The crop in this field was harvested last week, but I noticed a small area of wheat under a tree that the machinery had missed. I took my new scythe to have a go at cutting this to save the grain and straw. What I find amazing about doing something like this is to realize this is how our ancestors did it for so long. It was done like this, the whole field. It's hard work, but also it's really quite pleasant. It's lovely weather, it's nice to be outside. Of course it's hard, but in kind of a nice way. I suppose, yeah, if I had to do the whole field, maybe I wouldn't feel that way. That was tiring. All I have to do now is pick out every single individual ear of wheat. Now that I look at this, I think maybe it's not wheat, it might be barley. It's got these frondy bits on it. I think when people used to harvest this by hand, they would do it with a sickle, which is like a knife in one hand, and I think they would gather a bundle and then cut it so that you had the bundle, obviously, rather than just slicing it all down and then raking it up like this. I ordered a couple of things from this company called Old Town. The sad thing is that they are actually closing down this year. So this is like the last chance to get anything from there. So what I thought I would do is try and copy these items and make them in another fabric. They're a really, really popular company. People love the stuff they make. And I was really confused to hear that they were closing. I think a lot of people were. And I tried to find out the reason why. I think it's because the two people who run it are reaching retirement age and they want to stop. And I wondered why they couldn't just find someone to take it over. But when I looked into it, it turns out that the bigger problem is that they just can't get machinists who can make the clothes in the UK anymore because it's all made here. Which is really sad, but this definitely makes sense to me because from my background, in a fashion company, I can see that hardly anything gets made in the UK anymore. Like, not on this kind of small scale anyway, where it's really focused on quality. It's very, very hard, I think, to find people who have the skills to make things like that. I think I'm quite good at sewing things, but I'm certainly not like a professional seamstress. I don't work quickly enough. Yeah, it's really a shame to realise that that might be why they're closing, because we just don't have the skills in the UK anymore to manufacture things in this way. These sorts of clothes always remind me of this film I saw when I was a student. Someone told me about it and I watched it and it blew my mind. It was an amazingly interesting film. It was about fashion and clothing, but I'd never heard anyone talk about it in that way. It was a documentary and it was kind of about images, identity, who you really are and how you appear and how clothing is related to that.
What is it, identity? To know where you belong, to know your self-worth, to know who you are. We're creating an image of ourselves. We are attempting to resemble this image. Is that what we call identity?
So the director, who I think is Wim Wenders or Wim Wenders, he's German, talked with the fashion designer called Yohji Yamamoto.
My first encounter with Yohji Yamamoto was, in a way, an experience of identity. I bought a shirt and a jacket. You know the feeling. You put on new clothes, you look at yourself in the mirror, you're content, excited about your new skin. But with this shirt and this jacket, it was different.
But the thing that Wim Wenders observed about the clothes is that they looked like something that the person had always worn. Like, he tried on some of the new clothes and he said that he felt as if he looked more like himself than ever before.
From the beginning, they were new and old at the same time. In the mirror, I saw me, of course, only better. More me than before.
And this was what the film was all about. It was about, you know, how in the past people's clothes were really connected to their identity, and the things that they wore would say so much about who they were and what their life was like. And it really was like they were a whole thing with their clothes and their identity. Who they were inside was really connected with who they were on the outside. But now it just feels like fashion and clothing is all about dressing up as something that isn't you. Somehow, I think in the past, when people had very clear roles and identities, in a way it was easier to be yourself because you weren't worrying all the time about who you were projecting or whether you were doing a good job of being a certain way or a certain look. I also love the style that it's made and filmed in. It's really creative and interesting. He also talks about the transition from analog photography to digital images, as I think when it was made in like the 80s, that was kind of happening all at that time, and it was obviously something that photographers and filmmakers were really thinking about.
Can we trust the electronic image? With painting, everything was simple. The original was unique, and each copy was a copy, a forgery. With photography and then film, it began to get complicated. Each copy was the original. But now, with the electronic image and soon the digital, there is no more negative and no more positive. The very notion of the original is obsolete.
I think the point is, with the film, that we shouldn't be trying to imitate an image, like an identity that we have external to ourselves. We should actually just be trying to get to authenticity for us.
One day, we spoke of style and how it might present an enormous difficulty. Style could become a prison, a hall of mirrors in which you can only reflect and imitate yourself. Yohji knew this problem well.
One of the other things I find so interesting is how, as you live your life, you find that maybe the person that you think you want to be and the person that you are kind of growing into diverge and go in different directions. And for a long time, I fought against this. I had this idea of the person that I wanted to be, that I thought I should become, based on things like my upbringing and my education, what I thought would lend me a good sort of social status. And that was basically a fashion career. But then over time, I actually found the things that I enjoyed and the things I was growing interested in were actually moving away from that identity quite dramatically. And for a long time I resisted it, and I finally just was like, okay, that's not who I'm going to be. I can't conform to that identity I'd chosen for myself. It's actually becoming too difficult. The things I'm genuinely interested in are differing and they're leading me away from that. I'm not doing a good job anymore of fitting that identity. And it was quite scary because it meant that I was just sort of forming this other identity that didn't seem to fit neatly into a box. This is my absolutely abysmal onion harvest. I got hardly any onions this year, and most of them are barely any bigger than when I put them in the ground like 6 months ago. So this is kind of disappointing. I think it was because of the slugs. I had slugs attacking everything the whole spring because it was such a wet spring. And I read that slugs don't touch onions. They won't eat onions, but my slugs definitely ate onions. Now that we have so much choice in this amazing modern world where you can choose to do or be almost anything you want, I think that that means a lot of people come out into their adult life feeling like a blank canvas, like they could choose anything. And actually it's quite a lot of pressure to then have to choose an identity and build it, which seems to be the way round that we do things now, rather than your identity being a lot to do with where you've come from or the experiences you might have had, especially when you're young, because you haven't maybe had a lot of life experiences, you maybe haven't tried doing a lot of different type of things, and so you haven't yet worked out what you really like as you. I remember having that issue for so long. I kind of chose a fashion career because I thought it was a desirable image. When I started to actually have experiences, that was absolutely not what I liked. And just because it was something that our culture reveres as success didn't mean that it was what I really liked. I was very surprised when I started rock climbing that was something I really enjoyed. This was all stuff that I hadn't really considered seriously as an identity for myself, but it was what began to just organically shape as I allowed myself to be led a lot more by what I really liked and just disregard how I thought it made me look. I got these out because I was hoping to braid them together like I did in the previous year when I had a really good onion harvest, but these are just so straggly, I don't think I can. Something that's exciting here is my corn plants, which are now way taller than me, are growing these weird stringy things, which I think is corn silk. It's going to be the top of like a corn cob. Also, my squash plants here are just going absolutely crazy, and I'm so excited. There's a weird one growing here. I don't know if it's ready. Oh! Whoa! no! It's like a knobbly, weird knobbly one. It was recently my birthday and I got this handmade bowl from a potter. It's similar to one that I already have from him, but I like the way that they aren't the same, but they kind of match. So my aunt, who I live with, the other day said, oh, there's a huge mushroom growing on this log. Have you seen it? And I came over to have a look at it, and turns out it's chicken of the woods, which is a really delicious edible mushroom. Oh. Whoa, it's so heavy. Oh. Wow, it smells amazing. Oh my goodness. So mushroomy. It's full of bits of grass and twigs because they've sort of been growing through it. I think it's because mushrooms grow really fast. When the fruiting bodies are ready to grow, I think they come just almost overnight, and that's maybe why other things like that are in the way get caught inside them. The thing about foraged food like this is that it always needs quite a bit of cleaning. So I've cleaned as much of this as I can, and I'm going to actually take these bits I'm not using and throw them back outside, because all of this is going to be full of spores from the mushroom, and I would quite like to spread it around because it's an edible mushroom. It would be great if more of it would grow. This mushroom can be strange to cook as it doesn't shrink like more typical mushrooms. I found the best thing is to fry it for a few minutes in olive oil and then add water. I let it cook in the water until it is reduced down so that I'm sure the mushroom is cooked through and safe to eat. So over here in this overgrown patch of the farm, there are a load of plum trees making these yellow plums. And at first I thought that maybe these had grown just in the hedge from an old thrown away piece of fruit and they weren't deliberately planted. But the more I look, the more I find there are so many of these trees, and I now am really thinking that maybe this used to be a little orchard, this area that's completely overgrown and been forgotten. When I'm harvesting the fruit here, one of the things I think about is how people in previous generations, maybe my family, maybe other people, planted these things, and they may have not seen the benefits, but now we're seeing the benefits today. It's amazing that something planted so long ago is still making fruit for people to enjoy now. I actually really think it helps you deal with death, even though that might sound a bit weird. I think somehow thinking about things that will outlast you, things that are bigger than you and longer in their duration than your lifetime somehow helps you deal with the idea that you won't be around forever. And I think it puts it in context of the world without you, like life continuing without you, and other people coming after you, but still maybe you're contributing to the future, even though you won't be there to see it. I don't know, somehow it helps me feel better about all of that. Might also be why I like preserving things so much. I'm just picking some mint because I want to dry it for the winter to have as tea. Somehow doing all this kind of preparation and preserving just makes me feel a lot better about the winter coming, and I guess I feel like I'm bottling some of the summer that I can still access on the really dark winter days. So when you're trying to do this, to copy a garment by cloning the pattern, it's actually the most accurate if you can take the whole thing apart and then iron all the pieces and get a really accurate shape from each pattern piece. But the thing about that is that if I take this whole garment apart, I won't have anything for reference on how it's put together. But actually, as I only need one side of this garment, because the pattern pieces are going to be the same flipped, I might be able to just take apart one trouser leg and leave the other one intact as reference. I decided to try the trousers in a thick wool fabric. I really want something I can wear every day in the studio that will keep me warm as the weather gets colder. They're not quite finished, but I was really pleased with how they look. I made this stew with the mushroom that I found growing on the log, the chicken of the woods, and some butter beans and vegetables and paprika. I was trying to copy a dish that I've had in a Spanish restaurant, which I really like. It's nice. Oh, it is nice. It's not quite the same, but it's nice.